Hey everyone, Jonathan Bailor back, and truly a treat for you today, friends. We have an individual with us who is just, we've all heard of CrossFit, but like literally this guy, our guest, was maybe founder is the wrong word, but he was in there on the ground floor. And in a lot of ways, I think when we talk to him today, we're going to see that some of the things you might think about CrossFit are the exact opposite when you have a brilliant doctor of physical therapy involved in CrossFit. And that's who we have today. He's a doctor of physical therapy. He's all over the internet, all over the world, working with top athletes on the Joe Rogan show, in the media, writing books. His new book is called Becoming a Supple Leopard. He's the founder of the profoundly popular website, MobilityWOD.com. He is none other than Dr. Kelly Starrett. Welcome, Kelly. How you doing?
Thanks so much. I'm great, man. Thanks for your time.
I got so excited there at the beginning. I couldn't even say your name. I'm so excited.
Well, it happens all the time. I'm not going to lie. That's why we've created an avatar, K-Star. That's all you need to know.
Can I call you K-Star for the rest of the interview?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Kelly, I'm actually not going to call you K-Star, but I do want to. Could you give a quick bit of background to the audience about your story, because you have a quite a long and storied story. Tell us about it.
Well, sure. We're here today because recently I worked on this project, kind of about trying to tie in a lifetime of experience as an athlete. My clinical doctorate as a physical therapy, my time as a coach. I own San Francisco CrossFit with my wife. We estimate we've done 80,000 athlete sessions at our gym since we started. And, what was happening was that we were having these kind of conversations about performance, mechanics, injury prevention, from children up to Olympians to elite military forces, and it was the same conversation. And, I really, I, like so many people, I was a product of the system in which I grew up. I mean, I ate the way I ate. I was, it was high carb, low fat, and then I trained a certain way, and I just did everything else everyone could do. And, suddenly I found myself in the middle of a revolution in the way we think about nutrition and performance, revolution in really this kind of open source model of explaining the way that the best athletes in the world train. Suddenly I had access to some of the best thinkers on the planet about movement mechanics. And, out of that nexus really was this sort of kind of, I realized that maybe there was some really easy slack we could take out of the system. And that's really, I think, why we ended up here today was that, a couple of years ago, we're in our third year of MobilityWOD, I was seeing the same sets of problems in my clinical therapy practice. I was working with athletes, I was coaching moms and dads, I was doing all the things I do. And then all of a sudden I was like, I came home one day and I was telling my wife, I was like, man, how is it I'm having the same conversation about bad spinal mechanics or lost pelvic position or unstable shoulder positioning overhead for my swimmers and these elite Tour de France? Like, how come this is happening? How come we don't know this? And why is it that none of these people know what to do about their pain or know how to spot their pain and dysfunction before it becomes pain and dysfunction, right? And so we started an odyssey where I was like, I have this terrible idea. I'm going to make a video a day for a year. And I'm going to put everything I know out into the world for free on a blog. And I ended up telling one person about it. And, 2 million unique users later and tens of millions of episodes viewed and books. And it really ended up being that people are so much smarter than we give them credit for, especially in the medical community and especially as coaches. I really think that people are working at the limits of their understanding. And when we're in this new epoch of kind of open source model, test, retest, share, that what we're seeing is that if we give people better tools, they'll make better decisions. And we, one video at a time, and now we're into like 600 videos. All the other content I've been lecturing about this for half a decade, and what we're seeing is we've been able to really solve some critical problems. If we just look at the numbers, for example, back pain in America is like $100 billion problem. It's amazing. In America alone, there are 500,000 spinal surgeries every year with dubious outcomes, and it's not that their pain isn't real. In the Army alone, 1 million non-combat related orthopedic injuries every year. 1 million. That's not IEDs. That's not gunshot wounds. That's knee pain, Achilles pain, back pain, right? We look at ACL injury rates in kids up 400% in kids under 12, 400% for ACL tears. And what we're seeing is that with all of this technology and all this ability to sort of monitor, we're still making fundamental type 1 errors. And what we were assuming was we could work harder and we could eat better, but we also needed to move better. And what we're finding, because we have all these different groups finally talking, and I'll tell you, CrossFit really created the model for me where suddenly I was forced to go out and seek the best powerlifters in the world, and I was exposed to them. And then all of a sudden I was hanging out with some of the best Olympic lifting coaches in the world. And then, oh, by the way, you also have to be responsible for all your body weight control stuff. And that means I needed to understand gymnastics. And then, Brian McKenzie is, brilliant running coach. And I had to be able to be responsible for all those aspects. And when I started being exposed to these different skills of what it meant to be human, I started to sort of distill down. So there are some basic archetypal shapes. There are some positions that make us what we are. And to the extent that we either are skilled or not skilled, we can either express all the things that a human being should be able to do or not. It became very black and white to me. Like, well, of course you have shoulder pain. You don't have full range of motion in your shoulders and can't express that full range of motion because we don't have the skill or the biomechanics to do it. And when we started putting out those sort of underlying messages, what we found is that suddenly if you did yoga, then you understood what the stable shoulder was, overhead, right? Pressing the palms together. It doesn't align the chakras. What a bunch of crap. It makes the shoulders stable. The same shoulder stable position that we talk about in Olympic lifting or swimming. And so suddenly we sort of had this master key that allowed us to start to understand what was going on in all of these movement disciplines. And it's not that we're the first people to ever take a crack at it. On the contrary, people have been trying to solve the problems of the human condition for as long as there have been humans. So here we are, and now we have all this technology, and suddenly we can connect the dots, and we have some innovation ways of thinking about the body. And lo and behold, I think if we don't get it right this time, we're doomed. And what we tried to do is create a Betty Crocker cookbook for movement, a Betty Crocker cookbook for resolving knee pain. So if you have knee pain, think about this way. If your oil light goes on your car, do you race it over and pay for the diagnostics? And no way. You just add oil to the car, right? You know what to do. And we just don't even have that fundamental, we haven't been empowered to have that fundamental understanding of how our bodies work. And it's our right to be able to perform basic maintenance on ourselves. Like, you should be able to do that. That's what it means to be human, and you should be able to spot what is a good position and a bad position. It's not about exercise. It's about becoming a skilled human being. And now we're getting there.
And Kelly, when you say being a skilled human being, I know some folks who might visit your website, they see, you were working with elite individuals. You're known for your relationship and status in the CrossFit community. If I'm an older person or just someone who's a little bit more sedentary, what can I learn from you and what can I apply today to get rid of that shoulder pain, that back pain, that knee pain?
Well, a couple things. One is that, we say your combat stance is your everyday stance. And what I mean by that was, 350 years ago, there was this Japanese swordsman named Musashi who wrote the Book of the Five Rings. And he said that 350 years ago. And really the issue is that your athletic self, your expression physically self, is the same person you are through the day. And so one of the reasons we exercise is not just to protect our hearts and make our lungs function better, but it's to reinforce the patterning and the mechanics of the human. So if I take this Formula One athlete, I take this person who is at the best in the world, basically I can distill down the fact that, hey, here's the world record in the deadlift, right, which is like 1,024 pounds. But it turns out that it's the same mechanic that if I need to reach into the crib and pull up my baby and not trash my back, it's the same thing. Look, one of our ideas is that you have to come out unharmed at one repetition, or at 1,000,000 repetitions. You're designed to be 110 years old and to be pain-free for 110 years old. And what we're seeing is that a lot of the problems that we're having are because we move poorly through the day. For example, here's a simple idea, and I talk about this a lot. If you're standing, your feet should be underneath basically your hips, and your feet should be pointed straight. And if your feet aren't pointed straight when you're standing, you're in a bad position. That's a bad mechanical position that puts you in a collapsed arch position that challenges the plantar fascia, the bottom of your foot. That's that bottom of the foot pain. That puts your Achilles in a bad mechanic. That opens up your knee and starts to be one of the genesises of knee pain and kneecap pain. It leads you to being in a bad position for your hip when as soon as you take a step. It's the same position where we see people tear their ACLs. It's a disastrous position. And it even causes bunions. And yet we don't even recognize that that's a harmful position because it doesn't matter when I walk like that times tens of thousands of millions of reps. And look, we tell people, if you're going to be an active person, we ask you to take 10,000 steps a day. That's a number that everyone is pretty familiar with. Oh, yeah, you take 10,000 steps a day. Well, that's 10,000 steps of your foot being in a bad position, of your arch collapsing, of your destroying your feet. And what I want people to understand is that what we learn is you can't run with that foot turned out position. You can't cut or lift weights or jump. And so what we learn is from the principles of expression of the highest expressions of human movement, we can scale backwards into the principles that work for us. So are you moving correctly? And it's very simple. And also, you should have a template for being able to kind of solve the problems. The reason you're getting stiff is that maybe you don't drink enough water, you don't sleep right, you don't sleep enough, and you're eating a horribly inflammatory diet, right? We have that, and you guys address that ad infinitum. But the other component of that recipe is the movement, and we need to figure out, is it that you just don't know what to do? This is why we do training. This is why there are movement-based practices like Tai Chi. Tai Chi isn't just about energy and flow. It's about a specific language of being very connected and moving through these very stable positions. Pilates, yoga, these are formal languages of movement, formal training. And so it doesn't matter what you're doing, but are you practicing, and can we scale those kind of higher function sports back down into the daily practices? And when we start to understand that, one, I correct the movement, and two, once I correct the movement, a lot of the problems go away in the first place. Sorry, we get an echo there. You there?
Yep.
And so then I also need a template to be able to resolve some of the dysfunction when I do get stiff. So sometimes it's not just an act of will. Sometimes it's an issue of, hey, your Achilles is really stiff. Your quads are stiff. This is an example. This has been in the literature forever. And it's called theater sign. And when people sit down, they start to get knee pain right there. And people, I'm sure 10% of the people listening to this will be like, oh, that happens to me when I sit down, my knees ache. Well, what's happening there is that when you sit down, one of the ways that you manage and hold yourself upright, because sitting is ungodly in the worst sense, is that it puts a lot of tension into one of the quadriceps heads on your leg, called the rectus femoris. And that rectus femoris attaches from your kneecap up into your pelvis. And what your body's doing is it's using that rectus femoris to keep your pelvis upright. It's keeping your back straight up and down so that you don't fall over. But as soon as you tension that very simple mechanical system, it ends up tugging on your kneecap. And if those tissues are tight over time, you can start to develop a really, really uncomfortable knee. And guess what? It's easy to fix. What you need to do is create some space. Open up, those tissues are stiff, and by creating blood flow and creating movement between those layers, because your body is basically a very simple mechanical system. It's so complex. It's like the iPad, right? You don't need to understand what the technology is about how the touchscreen works or how to turn it on or off, right? All you need to know is I swipe it, I can run the apps, right? I can read. Like, that's all you need to know. You don't need to know how the battery functions or any of that stuff. That's voodoo science. Well, that's how your body is. And when we start empowering people to give them the basic template for how they move and how they work, then suddenly it's really reductive, and it's so easy to solve these problems yourself. And, what we're saying is that, boy, we might be able to unburden the healthcare system of a lot of knee pain, a lot of knee surgeries, a lot of arthritis problems, because our hypothesis is if you have right lifestyle, that means you're eating correctly, trying to manage your stress, drinking enough water, and sleeping, and you move correctly, you're going to be probably pain-free, and you're going to look good naked, and you're going to feel great, and you're going to accomplish more, and you're going to be able to play with your grandkids, and you might win a world record and a gold medal, and it's the same conversation. That's what's so great about it.
And you'll be a supple leopard.
Supple leopard. And here's the title. I mean, people are like, what is that title about? Well, the title is a leopard can attack and defend at full physical capacity, instantaneously. It has its full leopard nature. You never see the leopard warm up. It doesn't have to activate its glutes. It's good to go, right? It doesn't say I have to bring my core temperature up. It's a leopard. It can go. And if you watch kids at recess, do they like stretch out and do their dynamic warm up? No, they're instantaneously can go full speed. Are those kids injured and broken? Nope. It's that their tissues can handle that. They have full range of motion in mechanics. They're like, they have all this capacity. And I know what you're saying. You're like, I'm stiff. I could never do that. And that's correct. We know it takes 2 years to turn your fascia over. And if you had full range of motion in your joints, and that's easy to see because why? Well, you should be able to do all of the things that are involved in a formal language of human movement, which is what we call modern strength and conditioning. And that's what's so cool. And what people don't understand about CrossFit, for example, is that I'm saying you're a skilled human when you can express full range of motion in your ankles, which is the bottom position of a pistol, for example. I don't care if you can do a pistol, but I care that you can get into the bottom shape of the pistol, right? Hanging from a pull-up bar is an expression of full range of motion in your shoulders. So is pressing some dumbbells over your head. And what ends up happening is that the language of training is really the formal language of movement. And it's not an accident that I have this template of movements, right, that really are just expressions of everything that a human should do and be able to do, right? Can I, for example, if you're listening and you're like, what's a pistol? It's a single leg squat, but you can do a two-legged pistol. Can you squat with your feet together and go all the way to the ground without your heels coming up off the ground? No big deal. Just squat down like you're at a campfire in the woods or you're having dinner with a family in Thailand. You should be able to squat all the way down with your feet together. And guess what? Probably half the audience or three-quarters of the audience can't do that. And that tells me you're missing hip range of motion, your quads are tight, and you're missing ankle range of motion. And that is why you're going to tear your ACL and herniate a disc in your back and cause a little kneecap rubbing and tear your meniscus, and it's all preventable.
Kelly, so what do we do? Certainly how we move and the quality of our movement is your message and is a message that rings true. However, we are often just told, and often to the individuals who may need to work on the quality of their movement the most. For example, if I'm a 400-pound individual and I just listen to the mainstream, just go do something, like just go move. I don't care what it is, a bit like guidance, like go in the medicine cabinet and take a pill. I don't care what it is, just take something, just move. What do you think about that kind of guidance, especially to people who may not be used to moving in the first place?
Well, here's the deal. It's all scalable. I mean, this is, through the CrossFit, this is what we teach. Let me give you an example. There's a great couplet, means two exercises put together, that was popularized, by a Russian hammer thrower, right? His name was Litvinov. He's one of the top 3 throwers of all time. And on Mondays, he would front squat 200 kilos. That's 440 pounds. He would front squat, keeping the bar in front of him. He'd front squat that for 7 reps. And then he'd run 400 meters. So he'd run a quarter mile. Front squat heavy, run a quarter mile. That is so hard. I only know a couple people who can front squat 200 kilos a couple times. Does that make sense? That's how unbelievable it is. And he would do that multiple times. Now, let me take that back into the average person world like myself. There's a physical therapy assessment called the timed up and go. And we use it to assess falling risk in patients. You stand up out of a chair, you walk 3 meters, you turn around, and you sit back in the chair. That's performing 1 squat and walking 6 meters. that's the same thing as front squatting 200 for 7 and running 400 meters. The key is that why is it that we have to take the skill out of being a human being? You're not just, and no wonder, we all resent feeling like we're just, rats, turning a wheel. Yes, it's important. You should absolutely have a physical practice to maintain the carriage. That's what you have to do. And I don't care what that practice looks like. But at some point, we're going to have to add some skill to that. We're going to have to teach you, because check this out. People are like, yeah, I can't relate to squatting. Well, you probably squat 200 times a day. You squatted to the toilet 4 times today if you're normal. You got up and out of the chair on the dining room table at least 3 times in the last 10 minutes. How many times did you get up and down out of work, in and out of your car, right, for meetings? And if you start looking at that, it aggregates into a serious number of squats, right? Did you pick up something off the floor today? That's a deadlift. And what I'm asking you to do is to go ahead and take the huge leap into, let's not only ask you, are you doing it yes or no, let's make that about being skilled. And so at some point, sure, we have to have a conversation about body composition. You know why? Because I have it with every single one of my athletes, every single one of my kids. My kids understand what is good food and what is bad food. Why aren't we skilled in that, right? And, when we look at, just applying that principle. I mean, if you ask my 4-year-old, how to stand, she's like, well, you stand with your feet straight. So what I've done is built that in. So if you're going to walk with your feet straight. That's your physical practice. Great. We might as well also teach you to squat appropriately and make sure that you have the good mechanics squatting. And that is a skilled movement. Who taught you to sit? Who taught you to squat? Who taught you to lunge? Who taught you to pick something up off the ground? And the answer is no one. What we've been doing is figuring it out. And some of us are very good at figuring it out, and some of us end up sort of spending our genetics, and then at the millionth rep, remember, I'm a physical therapist. I've had this conversation. What happened to your back? I don't know. I just reached over for the pillow, and it popped. And I'm like, well, that must have been a heavy pillow, because what was going on? Well, it turned out that person had no sort of consideration about their spinal mechanics. They didn't understand, hey, I should be bracing. I should know that what my abs do and how to create a stable platform. I know how to hip hinge down and pick up the pillow. And it turns out, think about this. Your kids can't really graduate 2nd grade until they can read, right, or perform basic arithmetic. Yet, do we let kids go on to the 2nd grade without knowing how to pick something up off the ground? Yes. I just volunteered at my daughter's field day at her school. I have another daughter who's 8. And my wife and I ran the sack race. And one of the things that we noticed is that the sack race was that a lot of those kids couldn't even get into the sack. This is elementary school to 5th grade. Half the kids couldn't hop very well in the sack. That sounded terrible. A lot of those kids couldn't even jump while in a sack. And then for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, I made them do a somersault. Halfway through, just had to do a forward somersault. That's called a forward roll. That's how you fall safely. And guess what? A full 75% of the kids couldn't perform a single forward somersault. And that's what I'm saying, is that we've sort of taken this skill out of what it means to be a human being, and we need to put that skill back in. And it's okay that as a side effect of teaching skills, we become fit. It's okay as a side effect of teaching skills, we become strong. But the real issue is, are you skilled, yes or no? And as a physical therapist, I have to help resolve people's tissue dysfunction, but the reason your knee hurts is that your quads are very tight, the tissues above your knees are very tight, and you move like crap. So what's your choice? Well, I can help you to resolve that knee pain by rolling out your quads and making sure that your joint works right. But at some point also you need to learn how to move correctly. And that's easy to do because you're wired to do this. And that's the issue, is that in some of my seminars, I show a video of one of my daughters at 11 months old squatting, right? She's 11 months. She can't walk. She can't talk yet, but her feet are very straight when she squats. She squeezes her butt before she goes down. She loads her hips and hamstrings. It means she sits back like she's sitting in a chair. Her shins are very straight up and down. She doesn't have a lot of knee forward first. And then when she squats back up, her back is flat. She makes her shins vertical, and then she stands up. And it's the perfect mechanical squat. In fact, it's a squat that looks exactly like the world record squat does. And my point is that imagine that your body has all of this innate wiring. It's like someone ran the conduits a long time ago, but it's our job as adults and as humans to pull the wires through the conduits and reinforce those patterns.
And Kelly, when you say reinforce those patterns, I think it's a key distinction, because I can imagine some listeners saying, okay, it's already enough that I have to exercise and stay moving. I'm super, super busy. But when folks get familiar with your work, doing this and being conscious of this, it's not as if for the rest of your life, you're going to have to consciously think and have a checklist before you move your body at all. It's more like you get into the habit, you deepen these neurological pathways, and then it's just second nature.
That's the point of all of this practice, right? So that it becomes automatic, is that this is deep practice. And we know, and this is to the point of why I'm even on your show, is that we're seeing the integration of all of these fields in a really extraordinary way. I use this example sometimes. Daniel Coyle wrote the book, The Talent Code, and we know from the neuroscience now that skill acquisition is actually a biological phenomenon where a neuron pathway starts to wire, and the Schwann cells in your brain are like, oh, look, there's these neurons. They're firing a lot, and they go over, and they myelinate. They create the kind of cabling around the neuron, and that pathway gets reinforced. And it's literally, skill acquisition is a biological process where, something wet happens in your brain to reinforce that pattern. And that's why teaching good habits, we say practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. And one of the easiest ways to start to change this is if you look at the advanced phases of motor learning, and we kind of get into that, it's very cognitive up front. I'm learning a new skill. When's the last time you learned a new skill or new sport? You had to struggle at it. You were really conscious. You felt like a beginner. And then all of a sudden you start to get you integrated. And then you did it automatically. And that's how your body works. And so pretty soon, because we practice every single day, and I get to bury all this practice into my life, right? I get to walk with my feet straight. Why? Because I'm going to choose to walk with my feet straight. And then pretty soon I just walk with my feet straight. I can catch myself. I can remind myself. But remember, the yogis had a daily practice. Even the Buddha said, hey, you probably need to meditate every day. Jesus was like, you probably should pray every day. I mean, what we're seeing is that we probably need a little maintenance, and that maintenance comes also in the package of 20, 30 minutes of exercise every day. That's my skill time and my training time.
And Kelly, what I really like about your message, what you're doing with Supple Leopard, and is we got to pop back a level here. I mean, it seems like so many of us, and it's so easy to do this because it's what the media tells us, is, we're focused on what's this pill or what's this gimmick or what's this trick. Just even, I'm not even saying like from a gimmicky perspective, but more just from just a small, like this small tiny thing you could do. No, like, let's take a step back. Do you know how to walk properly? Like, have you ever thought about that? Like, because if you're not, who needs this, miraculous anti-inflammatory pill if the 10,000 steps you're taking per day, to your point, are all doing some level of damage to your body? So, like, let's stop focusing on these micro things, and are we moving correctly?
And how about this? Pain is what we call a lagging indicator. In engineering, we have a series of lagging indicators. It means something tells me about something after the fact. Well, pain is a serious lagging indicator, but it's one of the ways that my body lets me know I'm in a bad position. So guess what that pain is? It's telling me I have a mechanical problem. But that's like waiting till your engine exploded light goes on before you do anything about it, And that's really the issue. What I really think of, and what we've kind of driven from our clinical practice, is you need 10 or 15 minutes a day of doing some basic tissue maintenance on your body. And you can go to my friend's website, Jill Miller, at yogatuneup.com. She's a very holistic, softer approach. She uses a much softer ball, right? It's really myofascial. It's a lot softer. It's very serious, but a lot softer. You go to my website where suddenly you're like, whoa, that guy's taking a barbell to his hamstring, right? Because it turns out my population needs a little bit more aggressive intervention. But the issue is, are you correcting the movement mechanical problems and the errors you're making for 10 or 15 minutes a day? Because that's just what it requires. And I think that you're clever enough to be able to really solve these things yourself, and at least take a serious dent at it. Like, you can't see me as a patient until you've really tried to exhaust the problem yourself. And what we need to do, and I'll tell you, my father's a physician, my grandfather's a physician, and we need to unburden our physicians of our crappy stuff. You go in and see your doctor, and she's like, yeah, the reason you have knee pain is you've worn a hole in your kneecap. And she's like, maybe you should stop running. And you're like, what? I'm not stopping running? Like, you can't control me. You're the worst doctor ever. Like, what the doctor is saying is so reasonable. Hey, look, you are moving like a clown. You've worn a hole in a bone that's designed to be 110 years old. Whatever you're doing is not working. This is a doctor's office. Do you think I'm going to watch you squat and walk in this doctor's office? No. So what we should be doing is taking all these really simple musculoskeletal complaints out of the hands of our doctors. Use your physician when you get into a car accident or have a bad fall or catastrophe or something pathological happens to you. You're having back pain and you've taken a crack at it, and then you go in and you find out, I have a kidney infection. Oh, right? But you should be clearing this off. Oh, you have back pain? Let me show you the thing that my grandma showed me for my back. Why is it? What's happened to us? We've completely lost ourselves. For example, my friend sent me an interesting link on the Mercola website the other day, right? And it's talking about just walking barefoot and its potential impacts on you, even on your nervous system, and even on your immune system, because you're exposing yourself to the ground. And I asked him, I was laughing to some friends, I'm like, how often do you think people are really barefoot in the world? And it probably is in a function of minutes. Like, they go minutes without, during the whole day. When they're at home, otherwise, they're not barefoot. And if you start to extrapolate that out, you'll see that, are your shoes flat? Yes or no? And what you'll see is that most shoes, for example, have at the very least 3 to 5 millimeters of differential from the heel to the toe. And some of the shoes we wear, and the high heel shoes, can be 3, 4, 5 centimeters of differential. What happens when you take a stick and you tip it forward 10 degrees? The head of that stick moves 6 centimeters. It moves. The whole thing tilts forward. So what if I take your child and I tip your child's center of mass forward? What do you think is going to happen? Well, the child's either going to start running and falling, or they're going to compensate. And then guess what? You basically have engaged yourself in ancient Chinese foot binding. You are shortening your heel cord. You're shortening the plantar fascia. And then you wonder what happens and why you're having foot pain and knee pain and back pain. Well, guess what? You were born with your feet to be flat on the ground. There is no doubt about that the shoe I want you in all the time is a flat shoe. And then we can give you some breathing room when you're running with a little bit of a heel. We can put you in an Olympic lifting shoe and give you some cushion so you don't bruise the bottom of your feet. But are your shoes flat? Yes or no? And if you're not running around in flat shoes, like my wife sometimes is like, hey, I'm going to look cute. You can't even stop me. I'm like, that's fine. But then she's like, God, my feet are killing me. And I'm like, wow, that's really funny. Isn't that interesting that you wreck and basically disobey the laws of your body, and you get some immediate feedback about your biomechanics, i.e. my feet hurt. And so what should you do? Obviously take some ibuprofen. Obviously. Keep wearing the shoe.
Well, so, Kelly, this is... And I love that you said laws of your body, because I think what can benefit all of our listeners from your new book, A Supple Leopard, is just like we talk about, biology is not a matter of opinion. So why are we debating these things? Like, we can study.
That's right.
This really isn't. And to be clear, yeah, I mean, these are physiological principles that can be demonstrated and shown. I mean, it's basic mechanics. It's like engineering. And folks, please don't be. And I just want my listeners to make sure they're not turned off by thinking that this is only for athletes, because it's real. And even your book, if I understand correctly, Kelly, is not like folks at any level can take this. And what it really is a set. It's like PE 2.0. It teaches you how to move in any context, because fundamentally, like you said, you don't just squat in the gym. You squat when you go to the bathroom. You squat when you sit down. So once you master these basic movements, you can basically reintegrate the laws of physical movement into your life, and miraculously, these pains that you have start to just go away because the cause is going away.
You've nailed it. And when we wrote the book is for everyone, and you can scale up and scale down. The first, chunk is theory, and then the next chunk is what your body should look like when you bend down to garden, what your body should look like when you bend over and pick something up off the ground. I mean, these basic shapes without any load, without anything that looks and smells like exercise. And, you know, it is a fundamental right to be pain-free.
And I would say that it's within all of our reach. It's just that it's very hard to accidentally do that. And that's a position that I think all of us unfortunately are in, where unless just chances are we're moving correctly, we've literally never learned those basic skills. And it's certainly worth our time to learn those skills.
I think you just nailed it on the head. You know, that, you know, we test the theory because the theory has to work at this very low threshold, and the theory has to work at the highest levels of performance. And we test this in the laboratory of human function, that if I put you into a better position that makes your hip more stable when you squat up and down, by the way, that's also the same stable hip position when you squat world records or when you run the fastest. And suddenly you can connect the dots, and that we test this in our language, and especially in CrossFit's language, which is wattage and work output, power. I can see a change in your capacity to do work when I put you into a better position. That means we've gotten more mechanically efficient. And that's really what we're talking about here. Is, do you understand the basic tenets of how your body works? And it's very simple. And you don't even have to have the biology underneath your belt. All you are wired for movement. And we just have been making the beautiful assumption that you have the software for the hardware, and you don't. And by the way, it's free, and you should be able to know how to do it.
Folks, his name is Dr. Kelly. Kelly, how do you pronounce your last name? I'm so sorry. I didn't ask you at the beginning of the show.
It's all right. We violate the diphthong. It's Starrett.
Starrett. Okay. So I was like, it's either one of these two things, and I was going to guess wrong. So,
no worries.
And certainly the website, MobilityWOD, folks, you can spend hours and hours and hours up there. It's a wonderful resource. And his brand new book is Becoming a Supple Leopard. Kelly, what's next?
Well, I'll tell you what, we're taking on some big social issues. If you go to the website, we have don't be put off, we have a pro version. It's like a graduate level version, but the whole thing is searchable, and our entire database of stuff is like public domain. So it's all out there. So if you go there, you can search in knee pain, and some videos will come up. You can start to ferret through. We're working with some really smart kids about kind of looking at how, our interface of movement and design. Movement and culture, and we're going to take on a couple big social things in this next go round. I'm working on 2 more books. Don't want to divulge too much, but we really need to rethink sort of how we interact in our society and the impact that's having on us. And I really think there's just we're so smart, and we have so much kind of good intention that if we just harness those things a little bit, I think we can, really improve the human condition.
I love it. Well, certainly sounds like you are staying busy, and there'll be a lot of interesting news in the future. So I really appreciate all that you do, Kelly, because teaching us how to move with high quality, really that's right up there with eating well and getting sleep. I mean, those are the basics. So thank you, sir, for all the good that you do.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. And folks, again, that's MobilityWOD.com, and the book is Becoming a Supple Leopard. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. And please remember, this week and every week after, eat smarter, exercise smarter, based on today's conversation, move smarter, and live better. Talk with you soon.